Joe, did you think the offense was where it needed to be to help your defense be its best?
Yeah. Outside of the turnovers that we had, I thought at the end of the first quarter, end of the third quarter, I think we had 5 turnovers, 3 or 4 of them live ball, which gave them opportunities. So yeah, I thought when we were spaced properly, when we had great screens, I thought we got really good looks. I thought our rim decisions kept them out of transition, but our turnovers is what got them into transition. And so defending them starts with your offense. I know it's counterintuitive, but like you have to keep it 5-on-5. And so you look at the first 6 minutes of the game, every shot they took, with the exception of Neesmith's missed layup, was in a 5-on-5 setting. And so you have to work to keep it 5-on-5. You have to do that with your offensive spacing, your decision making, your discipline, and then once it gets to 5-on-5, that's where the individual accountability, the communication, the team defense comes into play.
Joe, I know you guys didn't go to it a ton during the year, but in a series like this with a lot of speed, Indiana playing small at times, could Tatum at the 5 be an option here? Is that something you could think about, like an ultra small lineup at times?
Yeah, I mean, with their ability to play different lineups, the way they sub 2-3 guys at a time. They're willing to go away from sub patterns for certain guys. So you just got to be wary of going to anything and everything at any particular time. And it's something our guys have done a great job of, staying open-minded to whatever makes the most sense in the game and being ready to execute. So yeah, I think anything's on the table versus a team like this because of their versatility.
And I know there's a trade-off between the 2s and the 3s, especially going against a team like this. How much is some of the paint points, or I guess mid-range points in particular, something you guys can live with, and how much of the pick-and-roll baskets you gave up, something that has to be cleaned up?
Yeah, every basket scored, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to live with, and what do you have to take away? And so in each of those baskets, there's things that you could do better. And sometimes in pick and roll, people only focus on the 2-on-2. There's 3 other guys, and the spacing is different for each pick and roll. And so each pick and roll spacing has its read. And there's certain things that you have to be ready for. But at the end of the day, you got to pick and choose your battles. And because of the type of pressure that this team puts on you. So the first step is getting it 5-on-5, and then when you're in 5-on-5, it's easier to pick your battles.
Joe, you hadn't faced him in a few months, and once, and it was with Siakam. Now that you've seen him, do you do you think you have to maybe make some changes to the lineup, to maybe Brissett? Like, do you have to kind of adjust to, now that you've seen them whole and how they are now after one game?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what Bobby asked. Like, you got to be ready to just go to anything and everything. Again, you have to be able to look past those things and say, why was this segment not good? Was it a personnel issue? Was it a matchup issue? Was it an execution issue? And so after watching the game, I'd say 70% of what the mistakes that we made were execution issues. And so that's the first step, is to fix the execution before you go to something different. And that's the most important thing, and that's what this team is going to do. They're going to test your discipline to execute on both ends of the floor over and over again. And so I know the easy answer is to be like, oh, go to something different, but you got to execute, and you got to be disciplined. And I thought there were many moments of the game where we were disciplined, and then I think when we weren't, they were able to take advantage of that. So that's the key, is mental, physical discipline.
And there's certain guys who are fit for certain series and certain matchups, and other guys who aren't, and you're just going to, do you have to maybe dig deeper into your bench? Would you be open to that, or are you going to kind of stick with the guys that you usually play? How does that go?
Open to playing whatever makes the most sense at that particular time. Like I said, like, their sub patterns at times, their matchups, their things can be unpredictable at times. But again, it always goes back to execution first. We've done a good job with the 9 or 10 guys that have played of being open-minded and being versatile, going to different matchups, going to different types of defenses. So they're just going to test our discipline and our execution. And the first adjustment is doing what you do and doing it better at a high level of detail and discipline. That's the most important thing.
Joe, you talked about defensive clutch time plays and how sometimes people just look at the offensive ones, but obviously last night there was a whole series of big defensive stops, whether it was Jason Tatum at the end of regulation, Jalen's play, obviously. Is that something that you guys can simulate throughout the year? Is that something you practice, or is it just kind of like, now we have to lock in because these stops really matter?
Well, after losses, close game, I've said that the end of the game isn't any more or less important than the beginning of the game. And so I'll say it again, like, they outscored us by 4 at the end of the first quarter. They outscored us by 12 at the end of the third quarter. And so those are the things that you have to work on before you even get to that situation. And that's why we were in that situation, is because of the detriment at the end of quarters, which is something that they take advantage of. And the second piece is, situational basketball is a huge point of emphasis because how much of a crapshoot it can be at the end of the game, and having a bunch of what-if scenarios that you need to go to. And there's two things. Your guys have to execute at a high level. They got to make plays, and I thought our guys were able to do that in many defensive situations. Put those to the test, and they executed them. So it's a credit to them.
Al said last night before watching the film back that he thought he did a pretty good job defensively, and that he forced them into the shots that he would be okay with giving up. What did you think about the possessions with him on Siakam and Nembhard, and then as you move forward in the series, what goes into the calculations behind the matchup there with Horford versus Siakam? Yeah,
this team is the theme of this team is they generate a lot of chaos and noise, so to speak, because they want you to be scrambled as to what you're willing to live with and take away. And every game is different. Every matchup is different, and so that might change. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is making sure our team, our guys, our matchups have a clear understanding of what is great defense regardless of the result, and what is not good defense regardless of the result. And that's where this team tests you. And because of their ability to put up, 130, 140, 150, because of the speed that they play, it can be very difficult for most people to be like, oh, they're not defending, or oh, they have to take this away or that away. And so this team just tests your risk management, and it could be different every game. If you're down 6, I've talked about this with kind of other teams. If you're down 6 to 8 points, it's a much different type of defensive scheme than it is if it's tied, or if you're up 8 to 10 points. So the most important thing is the communication between our guys, our trust on what the matchup, what the coverage is, and have a clear understanding of what we're willing to take away. And that may change every possession, it may change every game.
Joe, how much did your team just need a game one like this over here to your right, just to have to win in dramatic fashion? And then how do you go about turning the page going on to the next one?
Yeah, I don't know what the team needs. I know we got to bring it every day, and so every game gives you an opportunity to be grateful for the things that you learned and grateful for the things that you need to get better at. And I think that's been a strength of our team, is regardless of if you won or lost, they've handled the 10 to 15 possessions that we did well, and the 10 to 15 that we have to get better at. And so as long as we keep that mindset, and you turn the page by coming in today and looking at the film and knowing where you have to get better. So you have to do both. You got to understand why you won. You also have to be susceptible to the reasons why you can lose, and get better at those every day.
And I know you've talked about how every game is different, but how much do you anticipate basically the track meet for a series of track meets?
I don't expect them to change the way they play. It's kind of what they do. Again, it goes back to how are we defending, how are we attacking, how are we controlling the margins, versus how they're controlling the margins. And again, this is a team where if you don't get back in transition, it really doesn't matter what you do in the half court, because of their ability to, because of so many percentage of their points come in transition. And that's what this team does. Like, if you don't execute on the offensive end, if you don't make it 5-on-5 and you give them a ton of transition baskets, they put you in a risk management bind as to how you're going to guard them in the half court because of their ability to go to things. And then certain shots that may seem like good shots are no longer good shots because you're at a deficit, and you have to adjust. So most important thing is managing the game, managing the margins, managing the quarters, and executing at a high level on both ends of the floor.
Going back to the chaos you were talking about, they play with so much side-to-side movement. It's not even just like passing, but the guys actually like crossing across the court. How does that test your switch principles that you guys have worked on all year, doing stuff like that, kind of like switch on to Halliburton at the top with Tatum and White? Like, how have you had to kind of amend the way that you guys usually switch?
Every possession is a what-if scenario, and it starts with certain things, and it's a read. And, but if you do this, then these opportunities present yourself. If you don't, here's where you're susceptible. And so that's kind of what we talked about today. Here are the what-if scenarios. Here are the if-then scenarios, and you got to be ready to communicate those. And so they just test your discipline and communication. That's really, they do a great job of that. And so it's a good opportunity for us to get better at both of those things, our discipline, our communication, and our execution.
Yeah, Joe, following up on what Gary asked you about, and you alluded to, Indiana, they substitute in waves, so it's a test of your depth. And do you talk to the guys individually if they're only going to get 4 or 5 minutes off the bench, that kind of have to make those minutes count?
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone's job, and one of the strengths of this team is people have stayed ready, and when it's been their time, they've answered the call. So nothing changes. And in a playoff series, you have to be ready to go to certain people for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and just stay open-minded to what makes the most sense at that particular time. And so, our guys have done that throughout the year. They got to keep it up.
Do you think that it's a strategy to keep, on their part, to keep sending waves of substitutes at you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into too much, like trying to think what they think, but they have a style of play, and it just tests your discipline, tests your communication. There was a possession where they subbed 3 guys in the second quarter, and we had the matchups. We got cross-match, gave up a layup. So, that's just discipline and communication, and it's just going to test you regardless of who's on the floor, Thank you, Joe. Thank you.